evening, everyone. You are listening to Making Life Brighter. I want to welcome you back and say hello. It's been a while, and I'm glad to be back and able to be here with you tonight. So we'll just give it a second and let people kind of roll in. And I want to talk tonight, and I'm specifically coming to you tonight because we have some crazy updates in the world, right? The world is churning, as you know, and we felt it necessary to kind of give a little more closure as to what's going on in the world. And I've been covering with you for quite a while the situation with Venezuela and with Sergeant Kotel and his information, since he seems to be on the forefront of the play out in the theater. He warned of this quite a while back, and he was one of the first people ever to do so. He was also the first person ever to call out and warn the government and ask them for some kind of intervention on our behalf. And instead, what they did is they ignored his warning, and they went ahead and they took his information and turned around and used it for themselves, which seems to be a common theme. Because they also took his mandamus that we spoke of, and they lost it in the court system, of course, and only recently came back to that. But they also ignored him and ignored that situation entirely. So I want to begin by, I just want to get him back on the line here. Hold on one second, because every time we talk, we always have some kind of issue with the computers, of course, and that's just the way it is, right? So that's the way it goes here at Making Life Brighter. But we have a lot going on in the world, and the world is heating up, as we know. And I don't really want to focus on negativity, but at the same time, I really think that we need to focus on what's up. So we have a lot of things going on in Colorado. We've had all kinds of seeming narratives that everyone is coming in and out of. But we want to get it straight and find out kind of what's really going on, because things are definitely churning and they're heating up. That doesn't mean that we have to heat up with them necessarily, but it does mean that we should be in a space where perhaps we have a little more focus as to what's really going on. Okay? So I am interested in bringing forward someone that you loved and people that we had covered in the past here on Making Life Brighter. And I want to introduce to you a claimant, a live life claimant, but also a very important Jural assembly member out of Oregon. And we covered some of the activities that they had at the time and what they were doing in Oregon. This is really important because they were setting a standard using common law, and they were bucking the system, trying to correct the system. But now I want to bring back on Cynthia Palmetier, and she is working with the Jural Assembly up in Oregon, and something that they are presenting and they have just written, I really want you to hear. This is a tremendous tribute to Americans and our Bill of Rights, our Constitution, the Founding Fathers, the point of anything that we stand for under that flag and under the Title IV flag. So I'm going to bring on Cynthia right now. Please welcome Cynthia.
Hi.
Yeah. How are you? Nice to have you here with us.
I'm good.
And back.
I'm puppyfied. 6 new additions to the family right now. So
yeah, Cynthia, just her dog had puppies. But Cynthia, you have been working with the Jural Assembly nonstop. So give us a little bit of an update as to what you've been doing there.
So we have been going after sheriffs for their oaths of office. We have gone after all of the people, our Congress at the state level, for their lack of a proper oath of office. We have been in the Oregon correction. We've been going after them all, And used to, they would ignore us when we would hold grand juries. This is a common law court. It's not just a jural assembly. It is actually a common law court that has been holding grand juries and petite juries and charging these people that have broken their oaths of office to us since 2022. So this is a letter that is going to the attorney for the attorney general of our state.
Okay, yeah, this is so powerful. I really
Yeah.
want everybody to hear this. They crafted this carefully themselves,
Mhm.
and this is really a benchmark communication. It's a historical letter, actually, I think. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Yes. So again, this is addressed to an attorney. This attorney has to approve of what we're doing so that our attorney general can move forward and actually speak to us. So what has happened is that every time that we go in to give him something, give him a writ of mandamus, for example, it has to go to their legal counsel. It never can make it to the people that it's actually supposed to be going to, and their legal counsel always ex-nays it, and it's gone. And we've been working at it to get around that system. And so this is actually a letter to a man named Steve Lippold, an attorney. Opening oneself to a different perception and role than they are accustomed to can be difficult for some and impossible for many. This is what is being asked of you in the message that follows. Our nation has known many coups and upheavals that are visible to the public. All the while, our nation has been gradually and insidiously infiltrated by an array of entities vying for position and power, which serve to fracture, confuse, and undermine the integrity of governance to the point of compromising the integrity of those who govern. Looking into history, true history shows us how far we have moved away from the beginnings of self-reliance. Care for our neighbors and community, civics, personal integrity, integrity and justice, moral ethics, and many others. Insidious acts have peppered our history, which brings us to the threshold of near collapse and a bankruptcy in every institution, education, medicine and health, politics, governance, the media, currency, and finance. In a nutshell, our nation was established as a republic and founded on the basis of common law, the laws of nature and of nature's God. The Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union adopted by the Continental Congress on November 15, 1777, served only the states. So the Constitution of the United States of America intended to represent a compact between the people and the states. While most people speak of the Constitution, mostly it is the Bill of Rights that they are referring to. It provides a refining to the more common folk and to what matters in our daily sense of well-being. It is broad in its interpretation, non-punitive, and yet provides simple guidance, not unlike the Ten Commandments. When combining the Constitution of the United States of America with the Bill of Rights, it is a document that has been crafted to provide reference and guidance unlike any other on the planet. It is a treasure to be held dear. Fast forward to circa 1871, when the Constitution began as statutory in nature, while initially maintaining common law. Enter the bankers with their Great Depression, and soon thereafter, the attorney associations and their infiltration into every business, boardroom, and institution referred to as legal, and where common law and the people got ousted from their land, soil, jurisdiction, along with their unalienable rights. Article 3 establishes a one Supreme Court, Supreme with a lowercase s of record. When combined with Amendment 7, in suits at common law where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise reexamined in any court of the United States, then according to the rules of the common law. This is where our jurisdiction stands. Civilian people, men and women, with their progeny on the land and soil, common law, without judges, without statutes and ordinances, the de jure, a legal concept that refers to what happens according to law and equity. This is in contrast to the de facto, that's the Latin word from the fact, which is used to refer to what happens in practice or in reality. For example, a de jure leader has a lawful right to authority over a jurisdiction, but a de facto leader is someone who exerts authority without holding the legal right to do so. The term de jure is often used in lawful as well as legal matters to distinguish a proper standard from a de facto practice. This is opposition to your admiralty, law of the sea, de facto, color of law, that is illegal and illegitimate. And this information came from Black's Law, the fifth edition. Our Article 1, Section 1 social compact has been formed for over 6 years, since June of 2018, and continues to work to educate and inform you de facto folks that your system is acting as foreign agents, FARA, on our land and soil jurisdiction and treating us as if we are cash cows for the corrupt, the criminals, the wealthy, and ultra wealthy, both foreign and domestic. As a provisional government on Oregon since 2022, our assembly, our social compact, and our Article 3, Amendment 7, one supreme civilian law court of record has exhausted our patience with your arrogance and ignorance of us as a people whose unalienable rights are tirelessly trammeled and ignored to death. Your fraudulent courts, RICO, persons acting as judges, attorneys as foreign agents, FARA, acting with the corrupted courts that profit you all more than handsomely with your CRIS system that leeches from every unsuspecting client or case your Leos drag into court. It is all coming to a screeching halt with your system falling and failing due to the sheer weight of its corruption and blight. We have informed you, we have demanded, we have attempted conversations, sent emails, we have served you well-styled instruments with proof of service, and we have been denied serving you on several occasions. Your time is up, and we are now in the process of following up on our grand jury decision to hold an arraignment and petite jury trial addressing due process violations owed to each of the offenses, to each of our many assembly members, for your failure of due process and for your denying us assistance of unfettered counsel for our people in many cases and situations. While she did listen to our appeal on a phone call, Shelley Hoffman expressed that she has no regard for us in our jurisdiction and that we should appeal to you, Steve, for authentication of our jurisdiction. That is absurd. Send it to legal. I call up the Chevron deference, that you are not any more authoritative nor have any more power than another person, nor that you in your profession more than the people. Be informed that we have returned Oregon, just as the nation is in the process of returning the United States of America to a constitutional Republican form of government as guaranteed in the Constitution of the United States of America circa 1859, an American common law form of self-governance, and where foreign agents acting as authorities will be disregarded or even banished for the harm done to people who simply wish to live healthy, happy lives free of the excess of graft and corruption we refuse to further endure. As counsel for Scheller, a response is required. And then Charlie signed it and fingerprinted it and sent it on its way.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, that is magnificent. I hope you could hear that too, William. That was really, really spectacular. Thank you for. Did you hear it? He heard it too, and he thought he's saying he thought it was excellent. So
yeah,
yeah, I think I can include you all in this conversation now. We have to make do in our technology here. Are you there, William?
Ms. Adams, I wondered if I could ask a courtesy of your current guest.
Yes. Can you hear him, Cynthia?
I can.
Yes. Go ahead, William.
Cynthia, listen, I was in the 101st Airborne with 2nd Brigade Combat Team in Iraq in 05, 06, 07, 08.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an incident that took place in 05 and 06 where several soldiers were involved with the raping and murdering and then burning of a 15-year-old Sunni girl. And in 07 and 08, one of our very good medics, a Corporal Ellis, first name Jessica, had died from an IED. Now, she was honored when we came back from Iraq at that time with her family. When the family showed me a picture of a small memorial that had octagonal designs with people's names in it, I was horrified and couldn't speak aloud to the family about the fact that a private Tucker, PFC Tucker, was listed on that memorial. And he was one of the felons that conducted those brutal crimes. And I would request a courtesy of his name being stricken from that wall, and we don't dishonor Corporal Ellis's efforts in combat, as he did something absolutely heinous.
And William, how do you feel that she can strike this?
I think it goes back to looking at who authorized the erection of localized war memorials through city and town councils, and perhaps could put out a quick request for information from several of the districts around her to find that one memorial, because I'm not sure of the location of it.
Is it in Oregon?
Yes, it sure is. The family flew in from Oregon to Fort Campbell, Kentucky to receive our unit, and we gave the family the honors for Corporal Ellis because she was a stellar soldier, an incredible woman. But Private Tucker was listed on that wall when they showed us the photos of their memorial where they came from, which horrified me. I didn't know, I couldn't speak to the family to that effect, of course, but I did speak to my battalion commander and let him understand that that was an incident. And I understand that some request was made back then by command, but I don't think anything was followed through with. I don't expect a lot. I know your guest is probably caught off guard by this, but it's an unusual incident.
Well, she's hardly caught off guard by anything. She's a well-seasoned warrior on this planet. Cynthia, can you respond to that?
Yeah. And which arm of the service was it? Army. Okay. I will have Ron and Charlie rewatch this, and Brandon and Bobby. Some people that are, some of them are ex-military and stuff. Watch this and see what I think I know where it's going to land, how we can pursue it. But I'll have them watch this video so that we can see what can be done, because we can hold a grand jury against them. We have actually been in touch with the Marines all the way, and all the way up to the Pentagon. They've actually I've spoke with them. Right now, they're saying they can't do anything to enforce what we've been doing because they've had a change in their venue recently.
What would the change be?
I don't know. That's what we were told. So, and of course, we've attempted to be in contact, which they agreed to meet with us, the Marines here in Portland. So they have a base, where they sign people up to be Marines, and they have a base. So anyway, it hasn't worked, but we won't stop. That's the whole thing. We have pushed and pushed and pushed until they can't ignore us anymore.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
So Cynthia, while we have everyone here together and hoping that we can hear each other, go ahead and share with us a little update of what you are doing in the Jural Assembly, because what you're doing is really important. Even though we'll have some factions here saying that it's in the fiction, it's common law, it's not fact, but I think what you're doing is benchmark. Go ahead.
And I understand because I do understand. And I think that they need to be married. I've already told you that. I don't think it's either or. I think that we need to return with proof. So recently, our common law court has we just held grand juries on the Department of Corrections for the state, which I got to meet with. And the last instrument that we served them was a writ of mandamus, which they accepted, and we videoed it because they wouldn't let us back in the building. But the assistant director came out and met with us. And then we went over to the prison, Oregon State Prison, and did the same thing. So we just held a grand jury on them. And then we did the sheriffs without a proper oath. We did the sheriffs with support of tax-driven state of Oregon foreclosures and evictions, which they're unlawfully doing and taking people's land. We did one on the FCC smart-related meters and smart bulbs and light bulbs and stuff. So, we did this last week. We did one on the Oregon State Police actions before and after the homicide of Robert Lavoie Finicum. We did one on Oregon's Constitution, Article 7, pre and post November 8th, 1910, about the de jure and the post de facto, on how, because we have both jurisdictions within our legal system in our Constitution. The amended is right beside the original, which, if you think about that, that doesn't happen. The current SOS regarding the state of Oregon's inability to show our de jure Oregon statehood documents. So they say that they don't possess them, that they don't have them, our Constitution. The 5G concerns, how related to the mRNA jabs, COVID shots, and surveillance. The fluoridation chemicals added to our water in the ADA and the Oregon State Bar, OSB, AMA, and ADA as a pervasive dictatorial governance unity. Those were the last 10 that we just did a couple of weeks ago, and we're following through. We've set up petite juries now, and I'm getting permission right in front of the Oregon State Penitentiary in their parking lot to actually hold it.
That's fantastic.
So we did the other, all those grand juries we did in front of our Capitol, the state Capitol.
Wow,
So,
that is fantastic. I really commend you for your continued work. And what's so amazing, again, I'm going to say this, is that how you work together is an example to how all government or governances should cooperate and work together. The way you conduct yourselves and how you go into and contemplate things and then work with it is something that we all could learn from. And I think that you are going to find yourselves in a position sometime in the near future where you'll be setting the example across this nation, and it will start there in Oregon.
I believe that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this.
I'm sure it's a lot.
I really would not be doing this at all. It's more than I bargained for.
Yeah. So in the things that you've done recently, what's the most profound thing that stood out to you that has been a turn that you didn't expect?
When we went with those writ of mandamuses and we received a letter from the Oregon corrections at the state level, that the head people, that we were not, they didn't say we couldn't, it was the way that they wrote it. And we went in anyway. And we were able, because they met us outside, a sergeant at the correction institution, and then the associate director of the Oregon Corrections met us outside. So we were able to video it, and they received our documents.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
And they received them before too. And we have gone into our Secretary of State, and they've ended up receiving our documents. They've just, I know that they're watching us. We're told that they're watching us. But we don't do anything that we're trying to hide. Like, we want them to know, this isn't secret. And a lot of the people that actually were found guilty in our Congress, they're even beginning to wake up and realize that this is real and that they've been duped, and they don't know how they got so duped, which is an amazing thing when, One of them is running for Secretary of State right now. So Dennis
Wow.
Lithic. So I am blown away. I, at the risk of repeating myself, this is what I know. Our nation cannot stay the way it is. The parties have to go. They can't exist. They're all evil. All of them are evil. And I am part of the Republican Party, but it's evil. And we have to reestablish what God gave to us originally.
And how do you see that coming about? What do you think needs to happen?
Well, it would be nice to enforce what we have as a common law court on Oregon, a lawful common law court. That's it, it's lawful. And that's the part that that's why they won't meet with us. Because if they do, they have to abide by what we say.
Interesting. And so what's even more interesting is that every person that is come together to be a part of your court are normal, average, everyday working people that are dedicating their time and their knowledge and their research knowledge to getting it right. So when you go to present, what have you done incorrectly that you corrected and said, aha, we can't do that again, but now we know we've learned something here?
Okay. Well, there's a lot. Every time we can't get into something, we find a different way. Like the writ of mandamus. I found that out of watching a document on the Chevron and turnover. And it was one of the things that they actually did to get it into the Supreme Court. And as soon as I found that, I went, oh, we can use that. And so I shipped it off to Ron and Charlie and to the action committee and said, this is probably the next step that we need to take. Here's what it means. Here's a definition. Look it up in Black's Law, And so
that's what William needs. That's what William needs for his case.
Yeah.
I'll put you two together.
Yeah. So.
And so you did that. And then what happened?
They received it. It is a higher court. We're the highest court on Oregon. So that's the thing, is that there is no higher court than the common law court that we reestablished. And that's a big thing, because by 1963, I think Florida was the last common law court on our nation. In 1910, I believe, they got rid of our last common law. It's either 1910 or 1940 that they got rid of our last common law court on Oregon. But when our nation, even before our nation began, common law was the courts of the people. That's how they took care of business.
And when did you establish again?
In 2018, everything went through the state, and they didn't acknowledge any of our information that we were sending to them. So they acquiesced, and we became a lawful common law court because they didn't respond. And it was done in a lawful, legal, according to their laws, ways.
Are you working with other states at this time to continue
We've been
that?
working with other states, but it is difficult. There's a lot of assemblies everywhere, and there's even assemblies that are Jural assemblies that are common law, but they haven't done one trial. They haven't had one grand jury. They haven't done anything. It's actually quite simple. It takes 21 days to do it. It's really simple.
Well, you guys are warriors, though. I mean, you're an extraordinary group, and that's why I say I think it will catch fire from your position.
I think California and Washington will be the next ones, and then Idaho. But yes, we have people that actually come on to our meetings from other states now on our Monday night meetings.
Now, this is the Jural Assembly in Oregon. So for anyone that's tuning in and listening, this is Cynthia Palmetier, and we've had her on before, but she's come back to read us something tremendously inspirational that they just wrote. So if you missed that, you can go to the replay and check it out, share it from there, because everybody should hear it. They're doing something that I believe is historical and is really profound. And so, Cynthia, let's talk Venezuela for a minute. What do you see going on in your townships and your cities regarding people coming in and gangs, and what's happening up there?
Well, we are a city that accepts all the illegal immigrants,
Your
and
sanctuary city?
we are a sanctuary city, and our whole Portland was just about destroyed in COVID by Black Lives and Antifa and the homeless and what they've done, and they're back. You know, they're stirring the pot again. Um, the gangs are everywhere. The tagging is horrendous.
But do you think it's Venezuelan-based gangs, or it's just gangs of Antifa, or let's say already established gangs here in America?
No, some of them are not. Some of them are not established. They weren't established here, and I have no idea. I'm really sorry whether they're Venezuela or not, but they're of Hispanic nature. And there was ones there. There was some that came in a couple of years ago. My son, who is a retired sheriff out of Kern County, he recognized, and it was from South America somewhere.
Mhm.
I just know that it exists, and but it doesn't really scare me. I go out on the streets all the time, you guys. I'm downtown in the middle of that, so I actually go
Well,
down there and pray. So
I
with
was
a
gonna
whole bunch of
say,
other people. I mean, I'm like, I
you
don't
have
know.
extraordinary faith, and
I don't know
your
what to
faith
say.
carries you.
Yeah,
That's part of the
I'm not going
reason.
to let. Yeah, I'm not going to let them take the city. The city does not belong to the enemy.
Yeah.
So, and it has a great calling on it, and that is a wave that will come out of this region that will cover the face of the United States, that will shift everything. And I do believe that when it happens, it's going to be so suddenly, just like the COVID, how fast they locked us down. It's going to be like that. It's going to shake people to their very core when this takes place. So I'm just waiting.
I love that. I love that. I thank you for your time here. You're
Thank
welcome
you.
to stay and be with us if you'd like to.
I'm
What
going to. I'm just going to turn off my mic and turn off my video
Sure.
so
Very good.
I can hear.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay. I will set you into the waiting room, and we are going to bring forth Sergeant William Kotel. And Sergeant William Kotel, we've had on before several times, and he has been the leader in sharing with us his idea of the world theater regarding Venezuela and the potential threat that we face here in the United States around that. And I really don't like to use that word, but let's be honest. There are things that are going on. In fact, I just saw a post today before I bring him on where there was a woman that had a hotel, and they paid her a lot of money to house these immigrants that came in, illegal immigrants that came in. And she housed them, but then large crates started showing up. And when the crates showed up, they were intercepted, and it turns out they were full of arma. They were full of guns. And so that was pretty profound and unexpected, really. So we have quite a bit of disruption that's silently taking place around us in all townships and throughout the United States for various reasons. We know that they're moving a lot of equipment, and we've been looking at the theater overseas, of course, and William has been very instrumental in sharing that with us. However, I'd like to bring him back in now to speak to us about what's really going on and what he sees. This is very important. So please welcome back Sergeant William Kotel. He was an Army sergeant, and he was he's retired CENTCOM intelligence agent. Welcome back, Sergeant Kotel.
Well, thank you for having me. Just a caveat really quick. I text you the information about the
I
fallen
see
soldier
that.
I was talking about.
Thank you.
And then maybe that will help, because it was actually a book written on that matter. But removing Private Tucker from that wall would be pretty paramount to removing a dirtbag from somebody who was honorable and others that were honorable.
Well, if you're talking about taking down statues and banning things, maybe that's where we begin, right? The people that actually raped and pillaged others. So, thank you for that. I appreciate you standing up for that and speaking that out because I know they will address that. That's the way they are. So,
Yeah, it's
thank you.
just one name off of the wall. So
Yeah, that's very good. Well, somebody could contribute to that very easily. Very good. So, William, thank you for being back with us. And we have some things we need to cover. We have just seen the chaos and the craziness in Aurora, Colorado. We'll start there. Let's talk about what you mentioned to me regarding the Hells Angels, because I never saw anything really much after that. And let's talk about what's going on in Colorado first, from your perspective.
from my perspective in Colorado, what I see is large groups of Venezuelans actually congregating to a certain location, which indicates they were given direction by somebody to do that. And upon arriving there, their first intent was to rob gun stores and help themselves to weapons. Now, Colorado houses a lot of military bases. Some of them are key bases. So when you look at the current steady state of what's happening in South America with Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro lost an election as the murdering dictator he is back in May 7th to Maria Cachado. And then he lost the election again in July 28th to Mr. Gonzalez and Maria Cachado again. Now, he has still not abdicated his position, and he has Russian, Chinese, Cubans, and Iranians in there, along with cartel groups that are terrorist groups as well, mixed in, helping him to maintain authority and control. So it's not a far stretch to feel or to think as though the United States would be the forefront of trying to remove Maduro for unlawful elections and also for crimes against humanity against his own people. So in turn, wouldn't be far-fetched to use proxy groups like Venezuelan immigrants to go up there and conduct what are called disruption operations, meaning that they are throwing around their weight with personnel and weapons against people that could be government or in the military and their family members, creating a disruption in their day-to-day operations to maintain, monitor, and to advise on what they find, what's happening down there. And this operation seemed to be kind of successful in one area to an extent. I know the media and I know that the local authorities there and others are trying to spin different stories, and that's their right to do that, I guess, if they want to put false narratives out. But the bigger picture shows that these people came straight up to Texas, were given vehicles with Texas tags, and drove straight up to Colorado and started hitting gun stores. This is a definite disruption operation, probably ordered by Maduro. And again, it goes back to his trying to maintain power. Because let's be real, if Maduro is removed from office, he'll be arrested for crimes against humanity. And as I've said in some of your previous interviews I've had with you, he most likely will try to run to Russia using whatever gold bullion and money he can acquire from his own country to use as a bribe for Putin.
Do you think Putin would accept him? Do you think any country would accept him? What would be the benefit for them to accept him?
The benefit, Putin would accept him if he had enough personnel here and enough money in his pocket to provide him with some benefit. That's how I look at it. Putin right now is losing a war against Ukraine, which is a conventional war. Obviously, Ukraine has dipped into Mother Russia, into the continent, and has started moving across Russia in certain areas. So Putin has stepped up his proxy activities and also direct activities. And what I mean by that is he's been supporting Hezbollah and Hamas against Israel. He's been supporting Iran, and he's supporting Maduro, and he's also supporting Silva Delulu out of Brazil, who's another bad guy, who is also helping Maduro. And there are others that are being supported by this in different continents. So he's trying to influence his old school influencing operations against the United States and our allies. And of course, he has China helping him, because China also wants to influence us to be able to take over all these chains of islands that they're taking over and ultimately take over Taiwan.
Well, what would keep them, what would keep them from taking over Venezuela, taking his plea maybe, and just taking over the country? That would be kind of a opportune positioning, wouldn't it?
Well, if you were in the American hemisphere as the country of Russia, you would be aggressed by a lot of countries, not just the United States. It would be a bridge too far, if you will, because there's just not enough manpower or troops between the two countries. And if they started bringing them there, they would be noticed. And that's why they were bolstering Cuba, and a lot of Cubans and people that are not Venezuelan are protecting Maduro right now because he can't trust any Venezuelans. But there's a lot of Venezuelans that are around the world right now that do support Maduro for whatever reasons, whether it's profitable reasons or whether it's threat of violence against their family. I don't know. But I do know that he is a crimes against humanity kind of guy, and he needs to be tried by The Hague and by others as soon as possible. And we should have addressed him before. I know that President Trump put a bounty on his head, and that didn't work. And I know that a lot of people have come out from different groups. And I even hear telltale signs that the Wagner Group is out there helping to support Maduro, as per directed by President Putin. So there's a lot going on with Venezuela. Venezuela, to me, has been the key because it's the mainstay communist country with influence and oil in the American hemisphere. And because Silva de Lulu in Brazil is a bad guy, he works with the Venezuelans, and he cut a deal with the Palestinians, Hamas, and Hezbollah with his own country. So we have a lot going on with those people. And then we have our support of Israel, which is not really good enough or strong enough, in my opinion, and not allowing Israel to go in and recover their people before they're being executed, like you recently saw, the 6 that were killed, to include one who was an American citizen. And the country of Russia is in such a support mode for, right now, everybody that's against the United States and our allies, that they're just putting their fingers in everything. And China is supporting all these operations.
And so how does that factor in with Russia and China combined? What does that do for us?
Russia and China combined only to an extent. I don't think that they totally get along as it's appearing, in the public eye. But what I do think is that it really puts a lot of pressure on the United States in particular and the West, dealing with a lot of countries like France. Like Macron wants to go in and, beat up Russia with his own troops, and he had to be pulled back. But, Macron's got a huge economic crisis going on, just as we do in the United States here. So it's not that simple to just say, hey, we're just going to, go down there and beat up on Russia. Ukraine and Russian war have been going on a while now, and Ukraine is a pile of rubble that does need to be rebuilt. And I wish there was some kind of peace arrangement that could be made between Putin and Zelensky, and instead of all the war drumbeats that are going on between them. And you can see that Putin is showing that Russia is a multi-versatile, multitaskable country that's going out and using a lot of proxy groups and countries to put other pressures on the United States. And I've given you examples of that, not to include the Houthi rebels in Yemen and, giving Iran what they need to go ahead and defend against U.S. missiles and things of this nature. So we've been facing this now and watching this build up for a while, and we've really taken little to no action to intercede in our own hemisphere, let alone overseas. And everybody's fearful that it's going to become a wider conflict. And that wider conflict will include groups like you see in Colorado, around the United States, that could create havoc.
Well, I just got a notice before we started tonight that, in fact, that's happening. And it's happening right here in New York State. It's happening in Williamsburg, which is a bit of like Amish country in a way. And I know the Chinese have been here buying up a lot of Amish land and doing cash deals with Amish because they have their own banking system. But these gangs, specifically Venezuelan gangs, are taking over areas of New York City and different areas around New York and Pennsylvania currently. And that's coming out right now, tonight.
And as I said before, these are Maduro supporters that are working as proxies and /immigrants and they're conducting these operations on his behalf. And of course, between the State Department and the Border Patrol guys and current federal laws on immigrations, they're taking these people across the border and they're giving them driver's licenses so they can vote Democrat, and then giving them a vehicle and sending them on their merry. And they're going all over the country, and they're linking up in these small cell groups. This doesn't even include the huge Sunni population in Dearborn, Michigan, or the big Shia population in parts of Texas, and the Chinese in upstate New York, and the Chinese trying to buy up these Amish lands. It's illegal for them to do so. Governor DeSantis finally got rid of this Chinese general, who was a head general in the PRK, that tried to buy up a bunch of farmland and turn it into biolabs right here in Central Florida. So he finally put his foot down and said, no, it's illegal. And that's the way it should be across the country. Foreign nationals shouldn't be able to purchase lands unless they have a cause to build either a company or a plant or something to that effect, and they go through the approval process. Going the backdoor route through the Amish that have their own banking and other things tells you that the Chinese are intimidating them. I don't believe the Amish would be selling their own lands, to Chinese people unless they had some kind of intimidation factor going on there.
Or incentive. What would be an incentive to do a cash deal in their banking? What's the incentive there?
So that they can buy other lands, maybe. But again, whether it's financial incentive or it's a fear tactic incentive, or who knows, it could be any kind of incentive. It has to be investigated. That's why we have groups like the FBI, who are very inept lately. And most of the federal agencies have been inept lately. And a lot of people in these government agencies, to include the Department of Defense, to my shame, have become politicized. And the politics in these agencies is off limits. It stops you, prevents you from taking your oath seriously.
That seems to be what's at the core of this, because how can we possibly put men in outer space or have the technology that we do or be able to surveil anything anywhere? We're supposed to be this mighty nation, and we are not surveilling, or we are not addressing all these little micro factions that are setting up here quickly. Why is that not news? We're taking down this, we're taking down that. Instead, it's being set up into the system. So who is doing this in our system? Who's actually behind that?
Well, I can tell you the people that are behind it are senior folks, and they threaten people with their jobs. And if you don't get along to go along, or go along to get along, you're out of a job. And you see whistleblowers all the time being ignored or discredited. You see people that have a real problem with what's happening. This started during the President Obama time when he was going for re-election in 2012. We stopped reporting on Sunni attacks out of CENTCOM, which they were attacking like crazy because the Sunnis were being disenfranchised in Iraq. Now, you fast forward that to today, you have this administration that's bringing mass numbers across the border. Most of them were created by the Venezuelan government. No South and Central American country wants these Venezuelans there, so they're pushing them north. And we're happily accepting them as long as we give them a driver's license and say, vote Democrat.
Right.
That's outrageous. And if you look at any media outlet today, every big media outlet, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, CBS, ABC, whatever, any one of these outlets today, what is the priority of news reporting? It's the election. Yeah. That's the only thing they're talking about. They're not talking about the issues overseas or at the border. We're talking about the economy. No one's failing to mention, or people are failing to mention the fact, except for Fox News, that 818,000 jobs in the jobs market report were lies. It took people in the Labor Department to whistleblow to bring that information to the forefront. And this is where you talk about the economy going so south. And as I said before, if people don't have money to pay the rent and put food on the table, they don't care about other issues.
Right.
So if this administration's intent was to keep people poor and so they could only focus on their bills and then worry about the election and swear they're going to give people this and that back, it's working because people just can't afford to listen to the garbage. I mean, I don't know if you saw the news today about President Trump. He was indicted by a court. The judges in several of his court cases have been outrageous. They have violated God knows how many laws. Nobody's talking to the chief judge about the moral and ethical issues, and also the unlawfulness of the judge himself.
Right.
No one's talking to the boards of profession about these guys. So you have judges running amok, doing what they want and saying what they want. For example, no, you can't object. Well, that's a court of law. Yes, I can. No, you can't. I'm a judge. It's my courtroom. I can say that. You're on a gag order. You're on this. You're on that. If this is a billionaire that's a former president of the United States in good standing, what chance does a citizen have to go into that courtroom and present a case?
Right. And also in New York State recently, the governor's cabinet there just got investigated for her ties to the Communist Party and things like that through business.
Correct.
So it's shaking out a little bit, but the mantle is probably not cracking at this point. Yet I did see that Trump it's been pushed out a little further. So what do you see is coming? What do you think is happening now in the next month or two? What do you think will take place?
I think in the next month that locally, as far as domestically in the United States, you're going to see a lot of these cases come to fruition against former President Trump. Any effort to stop him from being a participant in the elections and the next president. I see Kamala Harris getting over on a lot of issues and just flip-flopping issues and not having to interview anybody. I see that as being other countries sponsoring and supporting their efforts and actions. And I think that's going to take the forefront. But in the background, normal people like yourself, me, and others are going to see a bunch of Hispanics, mostly Venezuelans, going around conducting a ton of disruption operations. You'll see some Chinese involvement. You'll see Chinese purchasing lands. You'll see everybody trying to get their last licks in on the United States, Russia, and also with Cuba. Now, Iran's going to throw their meat around too and try to figure out how to go ahead and slam the Israelis. So worldwide, you're seeing from the United States outcropping all across the world, all kinds of negativity before these elections. Now, if President Trump wins the elections, and I'm not saying I'm a huge supporter of him, but I am a fan of his over Kamala Harris any day.
Amen.
You're going to find that a lot of people's rhetoric will slow down. But then it's a question of getting President Trump in office to be able to actually give orders that these agencies have to execute, like Justice, FBI, DEA, Border Patrol, etc. They're going to have to execute his orders and not interfere with them like they did in the past.
I was just going to bring that up. Thank you for saying that, because he seemingly didn't get that done last time because he seemed surrounded, if I could say it that way.
You can. But if you look at this whole issue with Afghanistan withdrawal, the media puts out a spurt about the Afghanistan withdrawal being so negative every so often, every blue moon. Nobody takes it seriously. And yet, we've just made the Taliban an official modern-day army and military with what we've left, not including the classified materials and other things that they've sold. Some of our equipment wound up in Hamas and Hezbollah's hands to fight against Israel. And nobody seems to be too concerned about making anything happen or changing any of the actions. And if you go to before the withdrawal of Afghanistan, the entire withdrawal was completely illegal and unlawful. And anybody that raised a red flag, like I raised a red flag with Department of Defense Inspector General's office and Department of State's Inspector General office, they shut them down right before our troops were killed. An outrageous event. And then you had the commander of CENTCOM, a 4-star named McKenzie in the Marines, who patted himself on the back for airlifting 124,000 people, which we had no idea who they were, to the United States. And then he gets to retire, and now he's a professor at a university down in Tampa.
Yeah, that just seems outrageous. He should be the one that's coming forward talking about that. And why didn't they respond to you? And he should be responding to you.
And nobody responds to me. Apparently, it's easier just to ignore it like it doesn't exist, and media doesn't pick it up for whatever reason. I mean, that's the scary part. A lot of your shows have covered people that have really relevant information to things that are going on, and they don't cover it. And then today, retired Army General Jack Keane, who's a Fox News supporter and analyst and speaks on Fox News, he also runs the Institute for Study of War, has come out and said, we're looking at World War III. And he said this quite a few times, but he's had my information for over 2 years now. So all of a sudden, as of today, it's a World War III event. Back then, it didn't matter.
Right.
You see,
this is the theme, right?
This is what's been happening.
Mm-hmm.
So when it's relevant. So the big question is, regular Americans across America and other people in other countries around the world that watch America are really looking at this. And the question is, what's that threshold of how much you're going to put up with? How much can you either afford financially or physically to put up with? How much can people get away with different things? Whether it's the Board of Education doing dirty deeds, or it's the immigrations policy allowing dirty deeds to be done, or whether it's foreign adversaries on U.S. soil doing dirty deeds. At what point is enough enough?
Right.
And then Americans will stand up and they'll start taking matters into their own hands. You're going to see congressmen and senators and local governors, as well as, mayors and city council members and others that are going to be basically overwhelmed with people coming into them in person saying, look, you're not responding to my calls or my emails or my texts. Your people are rude and obnoxious on the phone, and I see no action. And you're what? Or you're on the board for what? Or you're on the committee for what? Armed Services Committee, Intelligence Committee, whatever, judicial. These are the people that are required to do certain deeds that aren't being done. And you still see constant threats. Like former President Trump's attempted assassination. When that happened, the only thing I told several media outlets like One American News and Fox and others, you need a copy of the rules of engagement for the Secret Service snipers. The rules of engagement specify exactly what they're allowed to do and not to do. And when there's an imminent threat, meaning that there's a threat, someone's about to fire a weapon, meaning they have their hand near a trigger well of a handgun or a rifle, you are authorized without calling up to take a shot and terminate that target and terminate that threat. That didn't happen.
No.
So they go through this big congressional panel and committee, and these guys have all the information except the rules of engagement.
They're wasting dollars. They're wasting time. It's a distractive narrative again.
Rules of engagement are what tell the tale. They are exactly what they're ordered to do and can do and what they cannot do. It's just that simple. Military units get them all the time. Federal agencies get them. State and local agencies get them. This is what it is. So when you have a riot and you have law enforcement out there, your rules of engagement are simple. You will use complete non-lethal use of force. You'll use batons at close range, pepper spray at longer range, water hoses at further range, etc. There will not be any lethal force unless lethal force is used against you, and it has to be target identification so you do not create collateral damage. So rules of engagement are very specific, and they can go ahead and tell the tale of everything that went down. And right there, that sniper should be going to jail. Why? Because he violated his rules of engagement. He allowed a sniper to take not one, but several shots and never fired. How is that even possible?
Yeah.
Who has the authority to say don't do that? And why would you ask for authority when your rules of engagement specify you can take a shot? And that's one incident. Luckily, unfortunately there wasn't, totality, but luckily it wasn't other people like, President Trump or whatever. But the point being is that an incident like that goes down and just gets hogwashed by the news and gets mulled over by the Congress and Senate, and nobody goes after the specifics on what their actual rules of engagement were, which is probably nothing more than a few lines, then there's a real problem there because then no one gets the truth.
Well, I don't think they want the truth. I think the whole point is to distract and then move on. And you have so many things that are happening. It's corruption all over again, as far as I'm concerned. And it's stirring a pot right now. So it's a play and a counterplay. If you could say something directly to former President Trump, and some would say it's not former President Trump right now, what would you say?
I would say two things. I would say, number one, Your legal team needs to talk to the chief judge and to the board of professions and the attorney general's offices and complain about the conduct by the judges in the courtrooms, because it is completely unlawful and a lot of it's illegal even, and they need to be held accountable. And number two, when you get into office, create an executive order that dictates what each agency can and can't do, and that they only have a no later than date of 30 days to show response to that 100%. And you do need to make examples. So you can have the FCC go after media that incited riots for felony charges through the Justice Department. And you can go after other media outlets that created false narratives, and they could be fined in the civil area. Same thing through the Justice Department.
Mm-hmm.
And you hold these people accountable. And remember, you can't always fire a federal employee. So I would say this. You can remove the employee from placement and access. You can suspend their clearance if they have one, and put them as a door greeter until an internal investigation is done. And it can be an administrative one. It doesn't even have to be criminal charges. You can say that guy's tie is completely out of sync. I want him removed from his placement and access, put on the door, and then he gets investigated by the inspector general. Don't let them sit in their place of work and still communicate with their work buddies, looking at either classified or sensitive information and having access to changing or fixing that or getting their story straight. You remove them. It's just that simple. And I would advise President Trump to do that as soon as he gets into office so that every agency will follow his orders. And that includes his staff, as long as he gets a competent staff.
Well, what do you think is coming down the pike in terms of the correction that he's hinting at? He's talking about saving America again. He's talking about these things. Assuming that he would get in and be there, what correction really needs to take place? What is the number one thing besides what you just mentioned that he needs to do here or abroad to save America?
Well, the very first thing that he would have to do is fix the economy. And the way he does that is by getting us energy independent again, and then reversing some of these executive orders that put kiboshes on Ford, GM, and other vehicle companies and motor companies to mandate these electric cars that are horrible. I mean, this would allow for the economy to settle down. He's got to lower interest rates. He's got to make that a reality, because Americans are suffering. Regular Americans are suffering a lot. I don't know what kind of economic numbers the Biden administration has put out, but every one of them are false. Not one of them is supported by anything. And the second thing he needs to do is he needs to close the border down. He needs to get people out there and start removing these folks that came in unlawfully under Biden. He'll have to do, search teams to go, collect them and remove them, send them back. And then the third thing is get rid of Maduro so we can send the Venezuelans home to their own families. Whether they're for Maduro or for Machado, doesn't matter. The point is that they'd be able to go home. They wouldn't have the refugee status anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so those three things would strengthen this country in a heartbeat.
How do you see that being possible? Having everyone coming in and spread out all over. How is that actually possible to round these people up again? Because they seem to be busing them and flying them all over the place. Do they even know who they are? New York City is having a tremendous problem with this. We don't hear about it, but it's really bad.
For the most part, they do know who they are. President Bush Jr. Ran into office with a similar problem, not as large scale as right now what we have. But it didn't take his people but a few weeks to go round up a lot of bad foreign entities that shouldn't have been here. And I'm talking nationwide. And some of them were completely undocumented. Nobody knew who the heck they were, but they were found. Again, it would be the same thing under President Trump. It would be another victory and win. It might take a little longer because there's more numbers, but it's not going to be that hard to go after and find these folks. President Trump made comments even about removing these no-go zones because they're unofficial no-go zones. There better not be a no-go zone in the United States. But, cops are saying, I'm not going to Jural, Michigan. We're going to let the Islamic police do it and all this. And I'm like, what are they talking about?
Well, they did that here in New York State. The Chinese created an encampment somewhere with barbed wire and the whole bit in upstate New York, and the sheriffs are not allowed to go.
That would all change. Again, that would be a very simplistic change. It would take time, but investigators could find and get them. And they would rely on local and state law enforcement more than themselves to identify a lot of these people. Because let's be honest, even if there's bad guy criminal gangs that are out in the United States, they don't want these foreigners coming and taking over their territories. So bad guys tell on bad guys a lot. So that would be another asset. And originally you had asked me about the Hells Angels. Why are they going up to Colorado?
That's right.
Well, the understanding is that Hells Angels wouldn't be involved with any of this stuff unless something happened to them. So the Venezuelans must have interrupted some kind of business thing that they've got going on up there. So now they're going to go up there and clean up a mess that law enforcement should be cleaning up. So now you got bad guys on bad guys. I mean, it's not going to change the dynamics of things, but it will kick them out of that area. I mean, this was still a disruption operation. And of course, it could be funded by, selling illicit drugs or weapons that they steal, what have you.
Well, what makes it so that the military there, since there's such a large military presence, that they don't step in? Because if this happened in another country, we would be flying people over to go and help and save that country. It's happening right here, and the military's right there. So why isn't that happening?
No military can operate on domestic soil unless there's an act of conflict or an act of the President of the United States. So at the best, the governor would have to call in a National Guard, which he would put under state orders if that was required. In this case, I don't believe it's required. I think state and local law enforcement would have it well in hand if they were told to execute on it. They might have some federal advisors with them from the ATF and FBI just to keep it above board and to keep those numbers straight in Quantico so that we have a database already started. And that's how that would take place. I don't see this as being more than a law enforcement action required, even though this is an actual disruption mission that's kind of an act of aggression against the United States. But they're by proxies that are immigrants that are not, home, not with their families. So you don't know if they're doing this because their families are under threat of being killed or because they're just being loyal to Maduro or if they're getting something out of it. So that's why I say law enforcement could have this well in hand. You don't really need the National Guard for something like that. But the National Guard can be called in if they need to do a cordon and, control one area while law enforcement goes in and handles them. We've done that before with National Guard with hurricanes and other disasters, allowing the National Guard to do the outer security while law enforcement goes in and handles any kind of looters.
Well, the National Guard is being positioned all around New York City right now. They're being positioned around the courthouse and so on. I mean, they're expecting President Trump. Well, they were expecting President Trump to be arrested on the 18th of September. And I think that's part of the reason they have that going on there, plus whatever else they're planning in the background. And who they are, I'm not being specific, but those that are, let's say, not having our best interest in mind. And so, yeah, what is going on here? How can some go here and none go over there? It just seems we're losing peace within different areas. And it seems to me also that the police there in Aurora were told to stand down, just like the fires in Malibu, the fires in Maui. The fire brigade was told to stand down, and so many horrific things and crimes happened in Maui. It's no different. It's just a different way. So do you know anything about that?
Well, let me ask you a question to answer your question. So why was it so essential to push for Biden to go another term when he's obviously old enough to where he's not able to function properly?
Because they're going to slide him over and do their chess move and move someone else right into place. They thought it was going to be Gavin Newsom or Nancy Pelosi, but now it just seems easier that it's going to be Kamala, I guess.
Okay, same question applies. What's the urgency to forego the entire Democratic National Committee and to say, I'm appointing Kamala Harris, who is not elected by the Democratic National Committee, to be the nominee? What's the urgency to do such a drastic move?
Yeah, to try and control and bring it into their jurisdiction. I mean, they're swaying everything. Everything is, all the numbers are being swayed. Now, just from my point of view, I don't believe in any of this red and blue right now, because I think, like Cynthia said earlier when we started the show, it's all corrupt. Both sides are corrupt somehow, and this needs to stop. We need to kind of halt the whole program and start over again, in my opinion. But to your point, I believe that you're having factions that are going to try and justify their actions because of something that's just taken place. So if they can stir your attention and point it that direction, now you're over there, or the majority of the people are over there, and they turn left and something gets done while they're looking left. That's what I'm seeing take place.
Well, let me answer the question for you, in my opinion. And it's a simple answer. It's criminal activity. To be quite honest,
Yeah.
there are people that supported Biden, that are around Biden, and some are in politics, and some are in companies or corporations, and some are in other places, that are scared for their lives. So they had to push Biden to be the president. And since he couldn't, they had to push Harris to be the president. And they circumvented legalities and systems. President Trump's team is suing for the fact that Harris shouldn't be a lawful candidate. And I agree with that lawsuit, because that is supported by the Constitution. But these people are scrambling to not get caught. Why do you think Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook came out recently saying, oh, the Biden administration manipulated us on our platform and made us do this, and if we didn't comply, blah, blah, blah. This guy is scrambling for his life. He knows that he did criminal activities to go ahead and promote certain things and take it off. Why can you go to Facebook and watch a woman get raped or murder take place, but you can't say gun, or you can't show something about a patriotic issue or something about President Trump or about the military in certain ways without getting banned?
That's right.
These are the kinds of things, and I'm using Facebook as one example of many, many, many other ones.
Well, it's the PSYOP.
When you look at the totality of it, there's a lot of people and companies and corporations that are scrambling for their lives to keep these people in power so they don't get exposed until they find an exit strategy that suits them. They thought Biden was going to be alive and well, and they would rig the election again and make it so that he wins again, and they would be safe. Unfortunately, Biden's health went down pretty quickly, and he's not able to conduct that. So now they're relying on Kamala Harris, who can't put a sentence together with more than 6 words in it. And by the way, some of those words are punctuation marks. So let's get real when we talk about who's hiding what. You know, did you know that there are oil corporations working still to this day with Maduro and want him in office still?
Mm-hmm.
And those were brokered by the Biden administration.
Well, the Biden administration was plagued initially, and what you're talking about is the change of the narrative as well. Because if you notice, first, let's just dial back a few years. It was Anthony Fauci. He was on TV front and center, and suddenly one day he disappeared. And then it was Nancy Pelosi. And then it was this, and now it's monkeypox. And then, oh, we've forgotten about monkeypox. It's not going to be the thing anymore. It's now this thing, and now it's the new news story of what's happening in Aurora. And then now the sub-story is the Hells Angels are going rah, rah. All the narratives keep changing, and because the next thing is so disruptive, you forget the previous narrative. But if you really go back and add up the timeline of all the narratives that just slid off the page, how about Hunter Biden's son and all the accusations? Where's that right this minute? Where's that laptop situation?
Again, you're looking at criminal actions. And this is what they're trying to cover. There are so many people connected to illegal activity up there that they have manipulated most of the government agencies like the FBI and others, Homeland and more. And they've manipulated so many of the media outlets to put out their narratives only. And the social media platforms are even worse, that you have people coming out of the woodwork. Why did Zuckerberg go and testify all of a sudden saying, oh my God, they used me. They abused my platform. I had no idea.
Yeah,
this
right.
is what he did. I mean, do you for 1 second buy that?
No.
Of course not.
Of course not. No. He's, you know, the Guy's a toad.
Let's switch to the positive aspects of things in life, okay? So this whole World War III thing, yeah, it's a potential for some, conventional type war. I'm sure some of the experts like General Keane and all those have knowledge that shows that there could be a type of World War III. However, with the election looming overhead, regardless of what happens, if President Trump wins, things will go back somewhat to normal. Many countries will be in fear of the United States again, and the economy will be straight, and Americans can breathe and live. And that's what's going to happen. And that's a pretty compelling story, to be quite honest. And in the long run of things, if for some reason Kamala Harris does win, which I find very unlikely unless there's complete cheating going on, there'll be such an uproar by the American people that it won't last for long. And even if she does stay in office, she won't be able to govern as a president in the most negative way as Biden has done, with the border being open and the economy being like it is, and Janet Yellen raising interest rates, and Medicare for all and all this other garbage that's unrealistic, completely unrealistic. This will all come to a head. So the American people, as I said, have a threshold, and that threshold gets met at a certain line. And when that line is hit, then the American people go ballistic, and then they get into groups. And when they get into groups, they start going up to DC or to the state capitals and say, hey, these are the issues before us. Fix this, or you're done in office, or we'll have a class action suit against you, or we're going to take matters into our own hands and have our local establishments start passing local laws that help the American people to live.
And hence the Jural Assembly. So now if we go back to that common law court that Cynthia was presenting and talking about how even Trump has talked about the Republic, and people believe that the Constitution that's in the fiction was signed earlier on in 2020 and so on. That could happen. Now they're hinting at the capital being either placed in Texas or Colorado. What do you think about that?
I've not heard anything about the capital being moved to Texas or Colorado. I think that would be horrific. They can't do that.
Yes. Well, I think that because they were talking about Texas and the cessation of Texas and possibly even California, though I don't think that's going to happen now, that the capital and Trump would be behind that. He would be in favor of that capital being moved in a different position out of DC, because DC being the sort of deep state plague, and repositioning and starting anew with a new republic, which would speak to the Jural Assembly's conduct and their point to their work, no matter what.
I think that would be a monumental waste of money and time, and it would turn the United States upside down.
Why?
I mean, you think that people go nuts about the Olympics wanting it in their city and freaking out about that? Could you imagine a city or locale that's going to house the new capital of the United States? I mean, that would be so far out. It would be incredibly detrimental, I believe. And that's my belief as far as an American citizen goes.
Okay, well, let's cover a few more things, because there's some people here I want to shout out. Thank you, Matthew, for showing up, and Lacey, who's been commenting, and we have a few other people here that are definitely Cynthia's saying, why not? None of the states wanted to house the capital at the beginning of our nation. Right now, the capital does not belong to the people. That's interesting. Maybe it should start in Oregon. Why don't you do that? Invite him to Oregon. That would be a good beginning. But it is something I've heard often, and it's something I was even privy to hearing from other people that seem to have a no on what they want to do. Whether it will happen or not, it's sort of like saying we're going to get new currency. And whether we have new currency or not, there's people that believe we're going to have new currency, and they've already developed that new currency. So away with the old and the corrupt, as you're talking about, that which is very, very corrupt. And it is. It goes so deep. I think people are wondering at this point, can it be cleaned out fully? Can it end? Will it end? And I think what you're saying is that were Trump to get back into office, at least he would put a cap on some things and start to correct it backwards again. Now, let's talk about Brazil for a moment, because that is a major player in what's going on down south because of the alignment with Colombia and Argentina and Venezuela. Argentina seems like it's a little bit like Switzerland down there, but Brazil and its oil and all its minerals has a hand in everything everywhere. And with the airplane crash that just took place, I'd like you to comment on that, please.
Okay, first off, Argentina has requested an arrest warrant for Maduro, along with several other South and Central American countries. Second off, that plane crash, I believe, was not an accident. I believe it was a targeted hit on somebody. I don't know the nature of the personnel on there, but I've never seen President Delulu get out and make commentary about any kind of incident like that, because it was only a twin-engine prop plane that only had so many passengers on it. So for him to come out and make a statement really quickly was almost like he's covering something up. That's how I took it. That doesn't mean that's correct. It just means that's my opinion of it. But Silva Delulu is a bad guy. He's corrupt. And there's a lot of people that are in senior positions in Brazil, as well as senior companies and corporations that have supported Silva Delulu and got him out of corruption charges on several occasions. And then he took up the mantle for Maduro, and now they're BFFs. And then he cut this deal a month ago or 3 weeks ago with Palestine and the Palestinians and Hamas and Hezbollah, providing them material supplies, which goes against the embargoes that everybody else put on. And again, I go back to the fact that he was allowed to sit in position of authority because the United States hasn't been looking at South or Central America since Obama took office.
Well, what they've done is they've slid in Monsanto, that's bought up all the farmland down there and taken over and bought out the little farmers, and they've put the genetically modified foods in their seeds all over. And Brazil is a very big, rich country with land. There's lots of it, and they own most of it now.
Yep. So he's padding his pockets and trying to align himself so that he doesn't get arrested when he gets out of office either.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, these guys were caught doing criminal activities like Maduro and Delulu. And when they get out of office, they're no longer protected by that office. So they are susceptible to being arrested and charged for crimes, whether it's by that country or whether it's by The Hague for crimes against humanity like Maduro or more. And the people that are complicit in assisting them, like the Supreme Court in Venezuela, who said, we certify the elections. I don't remember the last time a Supreme Court counted ballots in any country. And also, I don't remember them when they have to sit there and lie. And the one judge that said this is not lawful changed his tune a week later on news. Why? Because he was threatened, obviously. Mm-hmm. So you're watching corruption and crimes against humanity, unlawful murders and death squads going nuts down there, taking down people that are speaking up for themselves. And this woman Machado is so lucky she's still alive, but I think she'd be a bigger threat dead as a martyr. So they're just trying to do an arrest warrant for her because her and Gonzalez won the election. That's outrageous. So we're not taking any steps or action against them. And I don't know if you know about this soldier that recently went on leave and then went down to Venezuela and got arrested by the Venezuelan government.
No, go ahead. Tell us
he's
about
on leave. Well, he's now in captivity down there, and they're saying it has to do with the United States doing some kind of illegal action against him. And the guy just took leave to go down and check on his family because he's got family down there. So, we're not even saying anything about him. We're not even doing anything with him. But Chevron Texaco can do phone calls and deals with Maduro, but we have a soldier who goes on leave, worried about his family, gets arrested, and we're not saying a thing. That's a hell of a double standard.
And we can go to Russia and pull out people, or we can take our wolfmen and go to South Africa and extract a human, but this guy gets left behind, essentially. There's no one supporting him right now. And you said down there that they turned off the electricity countrywide so that they couldn't report the mass murders.
That's correct. They tried to shut down their internet, their TikTok, their Facebook, their Instagram, all these social media networks that are housing and holding information on a daily basis. And then Maduro had to turn around, and then he released a bunch of teenage kids that are minors down there that they arrested. A lot of them were not just arrested, but raped, male and female. And they were raped by some Venezuelan soldiers, but a lot of Cuban soldiers. So why are Cuban soldiers down there arresting, beating, and raping kids?
Yeah.
Nobody says anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, at what point have we lost our entire moral compass?
That's right. That's right. Well, we're having some comments in the chat. Cynthia says, who owns the land where the Capitol exists? Who owns the land in D.C. specifically?
Federal government owns it.
Do they? Well,
yep. It's a federal piece of land, the only one in the entire United States, because it has to be autonomous from states, because in this country, the states have the power. That's what makes up the United States. Every state can pass its own laws and do its own things. The federal government only does oversight, and federal laws are added to state laws that cover federal matters. So, for instance, like child trafficking, or what is it, narcotics and criminal activity, things like that. They're all kind of hand in hand, but the states ultimately have the power. So DC, the District of Columbia, has to be autonomous to maintain the federal government and the Capitol. Otherwise, you'd have a governor that could overshadow the Capitol and the entire federal government, Congress, the Senate, the president, everything.
Interesting. We have another comment from Daniel-Jonathan Libian. That plane that went down in Brazil had several doctors on it that were about to release a cure for cancer. And I believe that's true. I think that there were some very important people on that airplane. And as a matter of fact, we'll just put it out there. There's already a cure for cancer. Nobody's developed it suddenly. It's already existed. They just don't want you to have it yet. So they're going to make sure that for anyone that was getting ready to put that out there, but that's kind of silly because there is a cure. It's sort of like saying that we don't have advanced technology. They had cell phones in the 1920s, and they were able to do that right on the street. And it was suppressed. All of these things have been suppressed. So perhaps this is moving us forward to less suppression. But William, I'd like you to please talk about what you see happening next in the Middle East and the whole Israeli occupation and that theater versus us, and what will happen no matter our elections.
Well, in the Middle East, thanks to previous administrations' policies, we have lost a lot of context and, I guess, disenfranchisement amongst both Sunni and Shia. And I've said this before in other episodes about Iraq turning totally Shia, which is backed by Iran. Obviously, Turkey is involved with a lot of this stuff, and President Erdogan, he's also involved with Venezuela, by the way. And I think that there will be further conflict, and I think it's going to be surrounding the Suez Canal, because that is a choke point that will affect people. Now, the good thing is President al-Sisi, which used to be General al-Sisi, a Sunni who runs Egypt, has done tremendous work to keep that open and to stay out of the entire conflict between Israel and Hamas and others. So we have other Sunni countries like Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and more, because they're already in a conflict through Yemen. Yemen has a Houthi rebel supported by Iran, they're Shia, and the government is Sunni. Now, the government did at one point go against Israel, but after that they pulled back. And there's a lot of strikes that have taken place by the Saudi government against the Houthi rebels to maintain the Yemeni Sunni government. So we've lost a lot of context and control over there. It's going to require more involvement there. And I think another place that we really have to look at and focus on, which no one wants to hear, is Afghanistan. We are going to have to go back at some point and get our equipment and get this Taliban group out of office and get these real Democrats in there, some way, shape, or form. Not as the United States alone, obviously, but some way, shape, or form will have to be done. because the whole thing goes back to suppression. And the United States, with a bunch of, I hate to say it, but really weird, corrupt people running around thinking that pedophilia is okay and thinking that, all these other crazy things are okay and I can take money and corruption's okay. This is not okay. This is against the laws. And no one's enforcing the laws on our books. So we're having difficulty if we can't police ourselves before we start policing other countries.
And what's your take on NATO and BRICS?
Well, I think NATO has right now some good concepts about defense. I think NATO has got some good comments and some good thought processes about what's taking place between Russia, Ukraine, and also with China's involvement. I think they're looking at more of a big picture issue. As far as the Middle East goes, I don't think they have much involvement with the Middle East right now because it's too big of a piece of pie to take in right now. You're already having all this other pie. You can't really take that in. But I think that they're still a necessary entity and they need to be maintained and utilized.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Very good. Is there anything else that you'd like to share tonight that you feel is pressing regarding the Venezuelan current circumstances? Now, we know that his plane just got captured, by the way. They took his plane and they flew it to Miami. Maduro's I'm talking about.
The reason they did that is because Maduro has sent out his little cronies to go to every bank he's got, every place he's got money, to try to get as much money as possible. And there's people in the United States trying to sell off properties either that are his or associated with him as well. So he has enough money to get out of Venezuela and get to another country, bribing his way in. Whether it's Russia or another country we don't have any kind of agreements with, or SOFA agreements or others. That's what he's trying to do because he can't maintain his current steady state. And Cuba has become emboldened, and he's using Cuban troops, a lot of them. And you see Russians in the background and Chinese as advisors and even some Iranians. But mainly you see Cuban forces and other forces from Brazil that are on the border making sure no one can get in or out. So he's made it really kind of airtight to try to get in and out of there so somebody can't take him out. But he's still trying to gain all these assets and monies to bribe his way into someplace safe that they won't charge him for crimes against humanity. And that's why he's fighting for his life and maintaining power. As soon as he's deposed by Gonzales and Machado, game over.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I want to comment also on RFK Jr. The gear switch seems, to me, more appropriate. I got to meet him at a meeting in California at the time that he was really taking them to task regarding vaccines. And he is a huge proponent for stopping the load of vaccines and vaccines in general. He's very, very educated on these types of things and what's really going on behind the scenes. So for him to switch gear, I think it's interesting that he took it so far and then changed camps. What do you think about that?
Well, I think you need to look at the election process right now. He went out and ran as a candidate. He's taking Democratic votes from the Democratic committee and side for Kamala Harris. I think the Democrats are scrambling to get him back on board. I think that the vaccine issue is not more important than the economy to him, just like every American. I can be sick as long as I can pay my bills. That's kind of how the mentality goes. I think that JFK has stirred the pot on the Democratic Party enough to where he's a threat to them. I don't believe he's a threat to Republicans. I think he's got the right messaging. I think his issue about vaccines are probably something that needs to be echoed by medical professionals that can really talk to that matter. I just think it was something he took a banner up for because somebody close to him must have been personally injured or hurt by such vaccines. But I think that wasn't the flavor of the day. Like I said, the economy was, and that's why he switched gears.
Yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate that thought. I want to read to you one of the comments and have you comment back. And if anyone has questions, please put them in the chat and you can ask and ask William whatever you want to ask. Yeah, no one is recognizing Palestine and as a country Lacey says, it was and is a nation even before 1948, and they took it over and killed people and took their land to turn it into Israel. And Zionists in Israel and other central bank areas follow the book called the Talmud, which literally states it's okay to have sex with a 9-year-old. Palestine was where Jesus grew up and or walked and practiced his miracles. I swear on my own life, this is all fact, with how unfortunate and terrible it sounds. And that is how bad the reality is. What's your thought on that?
Palestine was given autonomy back in the 90s. Palestinian Authority, which was the leadership of the Palestinians, was taken over by Hamas. The Palestinians allowed this. They were basically supported by Lebanon and Hezbollah, which was all supported by Iran. And that's why the Palestinians don't have a place to live or a home that's proper to them. They're being threatened and everything else, but no one in their communities stood up to Hamas. Most of Hamas and most of the others that are running Palestine are foreigners to Palestine. So they have their own country. Israel carved out a niche of country in 1948 after they were oppressed and took it back over from others that were supportive of Nazi Germany. I don't know how else to make that any clearer. I'm not an expert in history, but I could tell you about historical data that I was taught and told about. And that's pretty much where it comes from. But modern day, Palestine has its own government, and they allowed Hamas to take it over and usurp it and misuse it. And the Hamas leaders, if you notice, all live in Qatar. They don't even live in Palestine, but they're getting all this money that's given to Palestine for humanitarian aid. And I think the Palestinian leadership, the head of it, is worth a couple of dollars more than 4 billion US equivalency. So not sure where all that comes from, but they do have their own country. They choose not to run it. They let others run it for them.
Well, speaking of corruption, because that would be a form of it to a degree, taking it from the state that Lacey talks about and moving it into this other position. Let's dial back and talk about Benghazi again. Recently, Charles Woods and Nicholas Noe, who was on Making Life Brighter on Voice America back in 2020, he has hit front and center with a narrative with Charles Woods that Osama bin Laden is still alive and all that. Can you speak to that, please?
I can. The individual that brought the issue up back at the Doral Resorts, it was an event that was taking place. Charles Woods is a Gold Star father. His son, Ty Woods, died in Benghazi. He was an ex-Navy SEAL that worked as a private security contractor. Mr. Woods was being honored along with others. And a gentleman by the name of Ross Perot, who trains falcon birds for a living and lived in the Middle East training birds for a living, claimed he had ties to the CIA, which are unproven, claimed that bin Laden was alive and that he was hanging out in Iran. And the reason somebody does something like that is because there's a $25 million US dollar bounty on bin Laden's head for proof of life and location. And then a former private in the Air Force named Nick Noe, who was stationed in Germany for 2 years and worked as a cell phone store guy, apparently worked with Mr. Perot to overshadow Mr. Woods by speaking to this effect, saying he's alive. Somehow President Trump got it and retweeted that, but never corrected it. Huge mistake. Now, the Navy SEAL teams that went in there, they wrote books about this. They have movies about this. There was proof of death. The body was discarded at sea, so there would not be a usage of his body to conduct martyrisms. They would have a lot to say about this. But bin Laden is not alive, and this is a false narrative created by people that are just wanting attention, fame, and money.
Okay, thank you. That's important clarity. And going back to what we were talking about corruption and with Biden, I dial back, and I'm going to speak to those here that are maybe claimants. I've spoken before on my channel about my history when I started to interview Russell J. Gould and my involvement with Sergeant Robert Horton, who was his treaty captain at the time. And Horton had brought forth to me this guy that William just spoke of, Nicholas Snow. At the time, they were trying to get information to Trump because my executive producer for radio was a relative of President Trump, and they wanted to pass some information. But really what they wanted is to pass me classified, well, I don't know about Nick, but Horton for sure, passed me classified documents. They wanted me to drive up to Sacramento to get them. I did not, as I've told you before. And I said that is not in the guideline of my interviews, and that has nothing to do with my interviews currently and what the focus was. That information, and I never saw it, but I'm going backwards, is about somehow Biden's involvement into the Middle East and all the dirt on that, which is what William was speaking about regarding corruption. And also the Obama camp being complicit in the Benghazi theater. And the truth behind all that, which also involved Flynn. So bringing that full circle so y'all understand and you have a different understanding and takeaway that this has been very involved for a long time. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, and there is definitely a lot of dirty corruption, and in this country in particular. So to leave that where it is, I never took that information, but here we are, and the time is coming where the truth is coming out, and let that come out in its natural fashion. So anyone else have a question for Sergeant Kotel at this time? Let's see. Okay, wait, there is another question. Here, hold on one second, William. Hold on one second. How much aid and where is this? And how much money was given to Palestine?
Every year, the United States gives between $13 to $15 million in the form of aid. And there's more money given by the United States. And then there's other countries that provide monetary aid as well. And then there's physical aid in regards to medical supplies and food and actual drinking water, potable water. And then there's also infrastructure monies that were given. Basically, the U.S. government has a good policy where, like in Iraq, for example, we would have what's called provincial reconstruction to provide essential services or ESS regarding sewer, water, trash, electricity. And the mandate was 50% or more of all skilled and unskilled labor would be hired from local populace, so that once the construction is done, the local populace could maintain and have jobs to maintain that area where they live in. And this was another thing that went on in portions of Palestine as well as Lebanon. So these guys were getting a lot of both physical and monetary aid from the United States itself as well as other countries to a large tune every single year. And most of that money usually gets absconded with by the Palestinian Authority, which is the leadership run by Hamas, to purchase weaponry from countries like Russia, North Korea, Iran, etc.
Yeah, and Lacey's also following up with Biden just signed off of billions of funding to Israel specifically for weapons that bomb and destroy the Gaza Strip. Right now, this was recent. So billions to destroy Gaza and Palestine. Well, they're trying to create their own new Jerusalem, I think, over there, right? They're trying to create their own new faction. I'm going to put it that way. We have another question. Can he talk about Ukraine and Russia and where that's going and how do the Americans protect themselves? Tiffany's asking.
That's a good question, Tiffany. That's really good. I can speak to what I know. I'm not the expert, but I can speak to what I know. What I know is, and I've said this before, is that Zelensky should have worked out a peace arrangement with Putin a long time ago. And the reason I'm saying that is because his country, every city and town and village is a pile of rubble. People don't have essential services, let alone medical services, schools, other things. The reason that this conflict was so prolonged was because, in my humble opinion, Zelensky was blackmailing Biden for corruption he did between Burisma, his kid, and others to get more aid over there to fight this war against Russia. There are several districts in the Ukraine, like the Donbass regions and others in the parts of Crimea closer to Russia, that are total Russian speakers. There could have been some kind of arrangement or deal done back then. And now what you're facing is a war of face. Putin is not going to lose a war. I mean, he's ex-KGB kind of guy. As far as the United States soldiers protecting themselves, we are not anywhere in Ukraine. We're in Poland. However, we have our own defensive measures. I can say that. And those defensive measures will do 90% of the protection for anything that's coming in. Now, as far as a way ahead and looking forward, Ukraine has now moved their military into continental Russia. And that has created a huge stir. And just going to point this out, Putin does have over 10,000 nuclear weapons. And they are maintained in modern day weapons. So, I mean, I don't want to scare anyone. I'm just saying that this is something to really consider. And right now you have China providing material resources like, weapons and planes and aircraft and tanks and things like that. They have proven to be very ineffective on the battlefield. However, they're still providing that stuff. The ammunition is another thing they're providing. Now, Russia is inundated. They have tons of oil. And that's what the trade-off is with China. But my humble opinion is I don't believe China and Russia are really on the best of terms. I think they're on we agree to disagree kind of terms, if you understand what that means. So
Where
I don't
does
know how long
India fit into all this? India is like a silent piece to the puzzle at all times, but where do they fit in? Because they're massive, right? I mean, and Africa's never really brought into the fold too much.
There are two things about India people should know. Number one is they have a conflict area with China in the northern part of India. And that's a huge conflict area. There are casualties and exchanges of weapons fire a lot over there. And the second thing India has is a problem with is Muslim extremists. They have several in the country. And if you remember India's history, India used to be a much larger country until Mahatma Gandhi wound up having the Muslims and the Hindu separate. And that's where you had the creation of Pakistan. And that was a huge chunk of India that is now its own independent country. So there's a lot of issues with India. But India has made violent threats against China over and over again not to cross their territorial borders. India is a nuclear capable country, and they have no problem with threatening China, and they have no problem using their troops on that border against the Chinese military. Their numbers in China don't count for anything when you look at the same amount of numbers in India. So India is not really reported on a lot, but that is monitored, and India does have a strong presence in their northern areas, especially in the contested areas between China and India. And they won't tolerate incursions into their territories. They've proven it time and time again.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Cynthia, are you wanting to come back in? I can see your picture up here. I'll bring you back in if you want to chat. No, she's listening. Okay, very good. She's still listening. We've been listening here for quite a while, and I appreciate this. Now, I have one really off-the-cuff crazy question for you. We're going to go sideways where we've never gone before. In your time working, did you know about these werewolves, dogmen, super soldiers that they're making? Were you aware of these things? Can
No.
you say? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
No. You're talking about military drug trials on making people hyped up. That's all.
no, I'm talking about these animals that they're trying to breed for soldier type activity.
No, I have no knowledge of that. They used to use adrenaline to help troops fight better, but that was just adrenaline, nothing more that I know of. I don't know anything else about that.
All right. Well, I won't go down that crazy trail. What do you know about Antarctica and the stuff down there? Did we have to protect something there at any given time?
Actually, yes, there are U.S. assets up there that are not all military assets. There's scientific assets up there. And there's a lot of contested areas up there between Russia and the United States. And recently, China has tried to get involved with that. Because apparently there's some very important things up there in the Antarctica that are being looked at in the scientific community. I'm not saying aliens, UFOs, or anything like that. I'm talking about other things. I don't know what those things are. They're classified. I have no knowledge. But I will tell you that it's been a hotbed contested area now for some time. In the last 15 years, it's gotten pretty aggressive. And unless you actually had somebody up there that could tell you more, I couldn't speak to anything further on that.
Okay, great. Did you ever encounter alien type stuff in your work? Did you have to deal with that ever?
No, but I can tell you that the current administration has put out some alien stuff that's definitely against the Constitution, if you want to use that terminology.
Can you expand on that? What kind of...
They're usurping the Constitution, which is like an alien thing to do. It's a joke. It's not anything serious.
Yeah, now I understand. Well, there's quite a bit that's being altered in our world today, and what we're talking about is almost like the bird's eye view, the overview, and then dialing back in down to the ground activity. There's a whole lot of other activity that seems to go on regularly as well. Now, this is basically, would we call this still a drug war? Because I want to bring I want to bring people's attention to the fact that one of the most ruthless and successful drug lords was working in and around Osama bin Laden and in the Middle East. And he finally, after a huge sting, got put away. And really, for life, he was brought over here and actually put in our prison system. And they had to really dig deep to go get him. However, they just released him back to the Middle East in 2023, sort of completely releasing all the length of stay he would have been here. And that really raised my curiosity. I'm having some feedback here. It raised my curiosity as to what that would be about. And so that is something that we need to look at, because there is one of the most prolific drug lords, and you're talking gang activity. But this guy was so successful around the world, he was known as the #1 person. He put the people in South America to shame. And he got caught. But in 2023, now he's released. This is huge. He's gone back to wherever in the Middle East, and has he set up camp again? I don't know. But I'll continue on that trail a little bit later.
Sounds like he's on our payroll.
Probably.
I'm not kidding.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
I'll tell you a quick story. In 2012, I had an established report that the country of Afghanistan, the warlords that created the poppy seeds and the opium and opiates, most of their drug trade was actually with the country of Iran. And Iran had a huge drug problem. There were over 12 million women categorized as habitual opioid drug users and 3 million men. And it was basically a 4-to-1 women over men, probably because of the way they're treated over there. And Iran, that never came out that Iran had this massive drug problem. And the warlords in Afghanistan, they didn't care about the war or the Taliban. They just cared about growing their crops and selling them. So a lot of times, a lot of the Iranian border guards were getting gun battles with a lot of these warlords who were selling their product over there. I did a proposal to the United Nations team, which was run by this Maria McDonald, in regards to having drug companies come in, pave roads, give them electricity, sewer, water, trash, and buy their product raw, and then they could process it back at their own labs, and we could drive it back and forth, to the coast or fly it, and it would be good for stability in the region. Well, McDonald's, she thought it would be a good idea to have refineries built in their areas so they could refine their own product. And the question became, how does a group of people that don't even have running water, let alone internet access, have the ability to run and process, opiates in a manufacturing setting?
Mm-hmm.
That's ridiculous. But the fact that we can provide these jobs for them and do this would actually negate a lot of that, put a lot of warlords on our side, and we can control that rather than the CIA when they try to bribe them with millions of US dollars. They couldn't care less. They're still going to grow their crops. So it may be that he was released to effect this kind of clandestine operation to kind of infect the country with a lot of drugs or assist in the infection of the drugs, causing massive problems, because Iran has this drug problem and no one knows about it because they're Islamic and they can't tell you about it. It's a big deal, and it's 4 women to 1 man was the ratio back in 2012.
Well,
you can picture exactly why that is. So
it certainly seems like he would have more pull on, say, someone like Maduro or the people coming up through, or one faction of the people coming up through, or, some tie that way. Why would they release him in 2023? His stay was not up yet. So,
well, remember, Biden and his administration is looking for any kind of good news story to put out. I mean, the fiasco of Afghanistan, it was completely illegal and unlawful, created a huge vacuum in the Middle East, created another war template. The ignoring of Venezuela and the problems that existed back then all the way through till now, the issues of the economy going in the toilet, these are the things that he's got as his legacy. And covering of his own son and the lying about his own classified documents he withheld, and the double standard against former President Trump, who literally didn't do anything wrong. And in many cases, you look at that and you say, well, I need some kind of good news story to put out to the American people to say, I'm in charge, I'm doing something. And the releasing of a few hostages in Russia doesn't qualify as that. Getting back the hostages in the Israeli conflict would have qualified, but that didn't happen either.
Yeah.
The patrolling of South and Central America to stop the immigration flow, that didn't happen. Somebody advised him that it would be great, just let a flood of immigrants come across, give them a driver's license, and let them be voting age, and say, you can stay if you vote Democrat. They even handed out pamphlets and bags to these individuals that were immigrants, telling them where to go, what to do with money and everything else in it.
That's
and these
right.
immigrants are even getting a no payback loan to buy businesses up. There was a woman that recently owned a food truck. She spent 12 years as an Army veteran. She spent 12 years paying off her food truck for $25,000. And then an immigrant came in and got a loan immediately when she was denied loans all those years to buy her food truck. And they gave the guy $25,000. He had no bank account, no historical data, no credit, no nothing. But because he was an illegal immigrant, they allowed it to happen. My wife shared that story. These are the kinds of heartbreak stories that plague the Biden administration. And there is no good news story. So you take a massive drug dealer, you whip him out of jail, and you say, hey, man, you go over there and you create havoc. You do your best to sell the nastiest stuff you can and make those people suffer. That would be a good news story if Iran was suffering from this massive drug problem on public TV. They don't even publicize it now because now the numbers are up from 12 million to 18 million women and like 8 million men. So now the numbers have slowly increased over the years. But I mean, that's a hell of an increase in a country that's so authoritarian and strict by Muslim standard.
Right, right. And what's your knowledge of Muslim standards? Obviously, there's different sects all over the world, but what is your take on the Muslim standards that you had to, say, consider as you did things?
Well, for the extremists, not everyone, the extremists, anyone who's a non-Muslim is fair game to kill. It's like killing an animal to bring it to dinner, but you're just killing that just to get rid of it. that you can have intimate relations and marriages with females that are 9 years of age or older, that they have to have their private sections sewed shut so they can't have any kind of peace. They need to be head to toe burqa'd, excuse me, in a dark cloth. They're subservient. And if people don't follow these guidelines, they can be punished or executed. And it can be done by a local judge that's not an actual judge. He's just a guy that was appointed to be a judge. So this is the kind of extremism that I've been privy to in person when I was over there, and also when I was at CENTCOM, seeing from behind the scenes. So this is what they want.
How did you handle that? How did you navigate that?
Well, we came in to create a democracy, so you would have to stop that horrific behavior, and you would have to go by an actual standard.
Okay, so I have a question here. What are your thoughts about the commander of the USS John McCain, who was fired? Do you know about that?
I'm not familiar with that.
Not familiar with that. Hang on one second.
No, ma'am.
Okay. And I have another comment here from Matt. Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips. Transformation of America. Familiar with her whistleblower story squashed as national security threat. Did you hear about that?
I heard about some of the abstract points about it. I'm not intimate with that case, but I know that there's been a lot of whistleblowers that have been turned into criminals or discredited or worse.
Yeah. Red Eye, do you want to expand on that question? That would help. So Tiffany says, I'm concerned about the Muslims in our country and other European countries. What do you think about that in terms of the safety of our country? That sounds like we're fearful. America is an open book for everyone, but as with any country.
Let me let you look at this in a better lens, if you will, Tiffany. So when you look at all Muslims, most of them are just normal people wanting to go to work. Yeah, they have their own religion. Yeah, if you get with a Muslim female, you have to convert and all this, but they're not radicalized. So a majority, you say about 80%, are just normal folks that just want to go do their own thing and have a life. 20% are radicals. And the radicals apparently are the ones with the money, the weapons, the soldiers, and more. And they use those as enforcers to maintain order with the other 80%. And anyone that doesn't follow that, they make a short example of them by usually killing them. And they do it in a public way. I mean, one case in Iraq where a potential husband was told that his current fiance looked at another guy from another tribe, was taken out and stoned by her entire family to death. And U.S. units didn't respond fast enough to stop it, but she was dead when we got there. Now, that is an example of extremism on anything from rumor to conjecture to actual facts. And they don't seem to distinguish between them. That's why we have a nation of laws. But a majority of them are just normal people trying to do stuff. It's that 20% that we don't want solidifying in this country to say they're going to control the other groups, like currently in England. England, you have large groups of Muslims out because they're told you either go out and protest or we're going to beat the hell out of you or kill you. That's how that's going right now. And the English government let it happen. They have not clamped down on this. In France, you have several no-go zones, especially in the vicinity of Paris. A no-go zone means no French law enforcement goes in there. They police their own. Who in God's name gave part of Paris to these immigrants that came in and said, it's yours, police it? I mean, that is outrageous. That cannot happen in the United States. It cannot. Because they'll push people out and they'll do harm and they'll do other things. And they'll get away with it if that's allowed to happen here.
Yeah, I just saw a thing before we started by a fella who was clearly Muslim, and he was in a verbal contest with a a typical Brit white guy, and some female to the side was filming this. He walked right up to her and smacked her. He just hit her. It's just unbelievable. Like,
And he
wow.
wasn't charged with assault either, was he?
What's that?
He wasn't even charged with assault, was he?
Oh, no. No, everybody just kind of disappeared. And he just went on about his business. No, I mean, gosh, if some guy did that to me, I'd slug him back. He'd be in for it. We'd do it.
Absolutely.
I think women in this country, I'll say American women, especially young American women, they're not to be messed with, and they're feisty. They aren't the women of old. We have a different group of people now. So I would hate to see people corrupted by gangs of gun violence, but it is happening. It's even happening here. It's happening in upstate New York. It's happening around different places. I'm hearing about it. There's lots of robberies where there's groups of gangs, just like the robbery in Denver, where they went in and they took over the jewelry shop. And this is, well, that's kind of always been going on in jewelry shops. But just to say, this is happening in small businesses and cafes. It's happening here. It's happening everywhere. And the more that young people see this, that's happening, now they become an extracurricular problem because they get to watch this and then they think they can go repeat that, and they don't realize the ramifications. So we have a bigger problem on our hands besides just other rogue individuals doing this.
Well, there are many cops that want to go and do the thing that they're hired to do. They want to serve the people. They want to do what the oath says to do. And they're not allowed to do that. So now you have a recruitment problem with a lot of law enforcement agencies. People don't want to be cops anymore. And the ones that are cops are getting so frustrated and getting in more trouble for doing their job than not. And the big problem is because of the leadership in some of these localities or counties or even in the states. And it comes from the federal government. It rolls downhill. So we have to get back to standards. We have to get back to the rule of law. It's just that simple. I mean, people talk about we need to pass a law for this, we need to pass a law for that. The problem with that is that these laws already exist, are already on the books, they're just not being enforced. And this is a problem that many law enforcement are facing. No cop wants to sit there and watch a business get robbed and then told, I have to stay in my car and let it happen because it's a grand larceny only and there's no violence involved. That's ridiculous. What's the point of having a business if people allow it to be robbed? What's the point of having law enforcement if they don't do their jobs? So the people holding these folks back, they do it through threat and intimidation. Well, if you want to go in there and stop the crime, you just be out of a job next week. So now somebody that's a law enforcement officer not only gets removed from his job, but fired. No other agency will pick this individual up, and they can't be a cop anymore. That's horrific when you think about that, just on an individual one-by-one basis. When you look at that nationwide and how many places are allowing that stuff. Luckily in Florida, many places don't allow that. And same with Texas and other states. But in certain areas and certain states, they do allow this stuff. And it's really gotten to the point where it's just scary to just go out and do your job.
Yeah, that's the problem, is that we're going to come to such a place of fear that we, like I said a year or so ago, I put out a post saying that our biggest problem is we won't trust each other. We won't know who to trust. And that's what they're trying to do. That's everything that's happening. If we can create doubt and continual doubt, then we lose sight of what you just said in the rule of law, and nothing's balanced. And so Cynthia comes back and says, I cannot compromise. They cannot. Any Leo, by spirit we know. By spirit we know. All right, everybody. Well, I think that we have taken quite a bit of your time, and appreciate your follow through, your questions and everything. And most of all, thank you, Cynthia, for reading what you wrote up there in the Oregon Jural Assembly. And thank you, everyone, for participating. And very special thank you to Sergeant William Kotel, who's come back again to share not only his knowledge, but his experiences and what he sees going on right now with Venezuela And I will leave it to him for closing statements. William, go ahead.
Well, just to close, I don't want everybody to think everything's doom and gloom. I say this every time, but it's a true statement. Get with your family, your friends, your school groups, your church groups, whatever, just to start putting pressure on local, state, and federal politicians to do the right thing, to do their job. But in the end, regardless of what happens, we're having an election in a month and a half, or not even a month and a half, really, about a month and a half, I'd say. At that point, regardless of who wins, and if it's Harris, they're still not going to be able to promote these ideals about having the economy being pressed down and suppressed, interest rates so high, immigration so free, and also these local, state, and federal level attacks on businesses, local communities, and others. There's going to have to be a stopping point. And it doesn't matter if a governor or a mayor wants to say, oh, no, we're just going to let it happen. It's not. There will be a change, and it will be for the positive. You'll see that. And as far as internationally goes, Maduro's on his last leg. There's not only so much time this guy has left on the earth before he's tried or killed before he's tried. And then a lot of the whole South and Central American problems, as well as the immigration problems here, will go away a lot. Not all of it, but most of it. And as far as Europe goes, and talking about Russia and Ukraine, that situation is going to have to pander down, because many Russian families, moms and dads, sons and daughters, husbands and wives, won't put up with him putting their kids out to pasture and having them killed for no reason much longer. So you're really seeing a groping, a desperation for power maintenance and power grabs that aren't going to be able to last. They just won't. People rise up, and when they do, it's hell to pay if you've been corrupt or illegal. You're going to go down, you're going to go to jail, and that's going to be the end of it. So I would say look optimistically at things, look at your own families, friends, and do what's right by them.
Thank you. That's really beautiful. Thank you very much, and thank you for all your insight. Thank you, everyone. And Red Eye, I owe you a comment. You asked early on if I had spoken with Russell-J. Gould recently. I have not. And I hope that answers your question. I have not spoken with him for several months. So that's where we are right now. And I hope everyone keeps it steady out there. I hope that everyone stays safe, most of all, but stay steady. Don't lose faith and don't lose hope. You can understand it all, but remember, your spirit is driving the show. So be in tune, be awake, and I'm grateful for these conversations. I'm grateful for the souls that come forward, that come on this show, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you, Sergeant Kotel. And go jolly, everybody. Have a good night.